All right, and we are live. What is up, everybody? It is Dom, creator, host, and all the above of Survivor, Dearborn, and Grand Rapids, and I am coming to you live here on YouTube or Facebook, wherever you're watching it, to go over episode 4. It is one of our biggest episodes yet. It is the end of day 1. All of the tension had been building to this episode, and there's a lot to go over. So we have a pretty stacked panel for us to deliberate and figure out what is going on. So without further ado, we will bring in our guests. Our first guests that we're bringing is kind of a 2-for-1 on this podcast. We have season 1, 3, and 4 Castaway Matt and his wife, season 5 Fresh Meat winner Juliana, and more importantly, Josie from this season's sister. I'm not sure if anybody has caught that by at this point, but
it's a little bit of an Easter egg for everyone watching.
How are you both doing today? Whoever wants to take
it. Doing good. Calling in all the way from Cincinnati. I know we're quite a far ways from you, Dom, so It's good to be
I know. I get to see you guys more often on the day-to-day, so this is a little bit, we've already kind of discussed this episode one-on-one, but we have a special guest also joining us. For everybody tuning in, we will have, this is our spoilers from this point on, the eliminated contestant from episode 4, James. No. How are you doing, James?
I'm good. Trying to get over the traumatic episode, but this therapy session should help.
Okay, yeah, we won't charge you this episode. So we're ready to dive into it. We have some people in the comments. Valencia is back from Fresh Meat. I'm sure some of our fans remember her. She says hi, Juliana, as well as Mark says, Juliana and your husband looks beautiful. So thank you, Mark. Before we hop into it, James, you played all of day 1, which is pretty crazy because you went to every single tribal council, didn't lose a single challenge. And I think we can dub you the people's pre-merger, because I got so many texts after episode 4 of people letting me know that they were so sad that James was out. And it was like Ozzy or Malcolm got voted out of the real show. So James, what was it like watching not just episode 4 back, but episodes 1, 2, and 3?
I was happy with how I came across on the show, and I'm happy with how I played it in real time. This is getting ahead, but I don't have any regrets really. It was fun to watch those 4 episodes and fun to make it at least that far and get to play as much as I did, like you said, going to every tribal, and definitely got the most out of my time in the game. So
yeah, you took it you had to participate in almost every single twist that we had on day 1. From the jump, we had you paired up with somebody right from the start. We had you paired with Samantha, and your blood bond tie was that you were both engineers. So as a Survivor fan, James, what was it like, seeing that you had Samantha as a partner, and what was kind of your thought process on how you would, utilize that twist in the game? Or were you just kind of waiting for that to kind of to cross that bridge?
Probably the latter option. I didn't give it too much thought while we were playing. I knew that would be like a potential tool post-merge, or if something came up beforehand, but obviously we didn't really get any chances to communicate or talk at Exile or anything. So for me, it didn't really play much of a factor. Maybe I should have tried to utilize it a little bit at the end, but I hadn't thought about it the whole game up until then. So it was so far in the back of my mind that it really wasn't an element of the game for me, which is, I guess, a disadvantage, being that other people did have those partners. But again, I didn't really even kind of clock that at that point in the game yet, because we didn't get to that stage where it was super relevant. So
Yeah, the Green Tribe really didn't get a lot of time to think about things outside of what their tribe was doing. But I'm curious because Matt and Juliana, you guys were both on production and helping us plan the season, whether it was developing the challenges and the twists, but also getting the cast together. I'm curious on Juliana. We can ask you what your thought of James coming into the season and like how he was going to do. You played with Ryan, who was James's. Yeah, the rumor was that they were brothers coming into the season, that James was lying, but we debunked that real quick. But anyways, Juliana, you played with Ryan. James is a friend outside of it, got him into fresh meat, got him onto Bad Blood. What were your thoughts on how James was going to do?
I guess I was expecting James to play like Ryan did, given all those rumors and thoughts from everybody that, has had a part in planning. But, with 4 episodes down, I feel like James did a really good job telling a narrative of what was going on in his confessionals. I think he had more of a skill with that, which was really helpful in piecing together the storyline. And they were funny and entertaining. I think that, like, at first glance, if I were a competitor in this season, I would have been intimidated by James, just as I was with Ryan and Liam. So that would have always been a thought in my mind, but voting him off before the merge, I would have never done. Obviously, the circumstances we're out of your control during your vote off. But yeah, those would have been my thoughts if I was a player this season.
Yeah, James, you had to kind of immediately get thrown in the game, and that's something that Ryan didn't have to do. But you kind of assumed like this, I don't know, like this kind of center force like on your tribe, in my point of view, from the editing point of view. Like you didn't really have like close allies, but people seemed to like be gravitating towards you. What was that like, kind of navigating those first 2 votes, especially like with the chaos of Drew happening around you? Like, how do you kind of reflect back on episode 1 and 2, and who do you think maybe your closest allies were at that point, and even like your position in the game?
Yeah, so limiting it to the first 2 episodes. So I think Drew was the first one to approach me and try and create alliance. So, I mean, maybe that was kind of first impression alliance, but then obviously that dissolved pretty quickly as he kind of played too hard, too fast. I think Hannah was my next partner in it. And that was captured, where we each were like, hey, I voted you voted me, but we're good. And then Adrian was kind of always, him and I were kind of on the same page. And then at some point, Allie. And then that was kind of in my head, that was like my core, was those 3.
Yeah. So it was kind of like a trickle effect of like, getting one person and then other people just kind of started to follow. I feel like on episode 3, you were put in that position to kind of have to choose what side you were going with, or like what allies that you were, going to closely move forward with. And that was one thing that I kind of wanted to bring up, because we found you in that swing vote position for either keeping Grace in or keeping Carrie in. And you chose to keep Carrie in, who, not to get ahead of ourselves, gave the idol to Josie, who ended up playing it, sending you home. What are your thoughts, I guess, looking back? You said that you had no regrets. How do you like review that Grace vote again?
So yeah, that one, as I was playing, I don't know, probably episodes 1 and 2, as those were happening, I was definitely getting clued in that Adrian was really close with Grace. And kind of everybody was like I could kind of pick up that people were seeing Grace as a leader and like kind of that strong social player, and creating some of the tightest alliances. And so, and I hadn't really talked to Grace for whatever reason. Obviously the game moves so fast, you only get so many chances to talk to certain people. And so it was kind of automatic. I was like, okay, well, I've got these people. These people are also talking to Grace. So for me, if Grace can get voted out, I mean, then everybody comes to me, and it's not split, and that just makes my alliances stronger there. So I was always kind of, even before that tribal came, and even before her name got thrown out, that her name was kind of in my head. Like, this would probably be good for my game if we could eliminate that variable and then strengthen to me.
Yeah, and so kind of hopping into where we are left at episode 4, we have the Green Tribe. What remains of it, kind of standing around figuring out like what to do from there. There's not a whole lot that you can talk about, but everybody's kind of like relaying who they voted for. Allie's pretty transparent that she voted for Carrie. Everybody else, obviously voted for Grace, except for Adrian, who had pitched the idea of going for Grace and then reneged on that idea to appease Grace maybe and go for Carrie. And then once at the voting booth, voted for Hannah. He's very transparent that he voted for Hannah. And Matt, I question for you, as somebody who's played 3 times, has been on a crew for 2 seasons. We don't see a lot of burn votes kind of happening in our version, at least. I think the only one that really comes to mind off the bat is Brendan Esper randomly throwing a vote to Sydney, causing Jen to go home in fresh meat. But Adrian throwing a vote onto Hannah with such low numbers, how would you perceive that, I guess, right after Tribal?
I mean, so I think we're inclined to think that everyone that plays like the Survivor game is like a super fan, knows everything about the strategy. But like, I think that's the beauty of our Survivor is like, that's not the case. We're just all friends that happen to like play Survivor together. So like, that's the beauty in it really is like Adrian, like, sure, it wasn't a great strategic move, but like, that's how he was feeling in that moment. So like, you can't blame him for that. Like he's trying to appease it. He didn't, make the right move for his allies, but like, you don't always make the like game bot moves every time. So if I was in the game with him and I like saw that, I would kind of want to take advantage of that and be like, this guy doesn't know what he's doing. That might be someone I can take advantage of.
Yeah, James, I'm wondering what your input on that is, because Adrian was Addison, our guest last week's player of the week. And this is kind of where we get to see the repercussions. You and Aubrey kind of like collaborated with Adrian to maybe come up with this plan of Grace. You were at least there when he pitched the name, and then Aubrey kind of doubled down on it. To see somebody come up with the plan and then jump ship, was that going through your head at all, or were you just kind of glad to make it through that Tribal?
Again, probably the latter. I mean, I was always kind of, it was like, 1, as long as it's not me, and then 2, the person that I was planning on going home went home. So beyond that, I'm not going to overthink it too much. Did Adrian say that he voted? Yeah, he did.
Yep. And then Hannah clarified and said because of that, Grace was voted out because it was a 3-2-1 split right there.
Yeah, I don't know if in the moment I realized that I was the swing on that. We were all just hurting from another member being gone. But yeah, to speak on Adrian being ignorant towards how the game plays, that was obvious right away. I was explaining to him like basics about kind of how the game works and then how exile normally goes in the real show and stuff. And so I don't think I interpreted that as like, ooh, I can take advantage of him. But it was like, okay, this is someone who's not going to go crazy strategizing, overthinking things. He's just kind of like, hopefully I can just play with like him as like a real guy. Like we can just connect like on like basic social level and play like a not so complicated game together. So that was kind of like, oh, there's less factors with him. Like this would be a good guy to kind of.
Well, speaking of complicated games, we have the Vengeance Tribe, who are getting a good chunk of airtime this episode, mostly because the Vendetta Tribe was beaten down and just wanted to chill for a little bit. And all of this chaos that was happening over at the Vengeance Tribe was kind of happening during like this Grace vote out. So a lot of our main cameras were focused on that, and a lot of our cameras were going rogue, trying to keep up with what was going on. Juliana, were you on the camera at all over at Vengeance?
Yeah, I was on the camera with quite a bit, I feel like, with Zoe at this time. Josh a little bit, my sister a little bit. I think I was kind of back and forth, but I definitely have some distinct memories of recording different things throughout episode 4 for sure.
Yeah. So let's kind of hop into like where Josie's at. Like, what is your opinion as her sister, as the winner of Fresh Meat? She wants to play her own game. Very evident. She's repeated a couple times throughout the season. She finds herself in a very, very tight position to be in. She gets sent to exile, has to come back and relay this information to her tribe about the idols, and that Carrie actually, took an idol. She's meanwhile like planting seeds, it seems, that Carrie might actually have an idol, but it wasn't given during the hold and take thing. Watching all of this back, seeing how Josie's playing, like, are you able to kind of recognize that as her sister of how she might be playing, or like what is going on like in the game for Josie at this point? How did you interpret that watching it back?
I mean, I definitely feel like she's kept true to her word in terms of playing her own game, a game that was different than mine. We were very different personalities. I think that was very apparent right from the very beginning. I've definitely played a more subdued game while we were still in separate tribes, but she has not. She has a very like outgoing personality. She's very loud, and I think people gravitated towards that while also seemingly realizing that, she's a really hard competitor. I think her nerves really got the best of her when she came back from exile. I think she watched a ton of Survivor before this season, both Dearborn as well as the real show, and I think was prepared from like that standpoint. She knew what an exile island was and stuff like that, and I think her decision to be honest was the right one. But the way she told the story made it look dishonest. And I think that that's really where her nerves came out, because she knew all of a sudden that she had like power that she didn't know what to do with. And so, I don't blame the rest of her tribe mates for being confused, as we kind of saw over and over. But yeah, I just think that was a manifestation of like the nerves of, oh, how do I approach this? Is this the right way? And also tough because they're all getting antsy anyways. They haven't done anything.
Yeah.
They want to put a target somewhere. And, Josie's been friendly with people, but it seems like the alliances that are forming on that side do not include her. So knowing who to trust at that point was probably pretty tough for her as well.
Yeah. So she's found herself in kind of a tight position even before the challenge. She's already on people's radars, but somebody else who's on other people's radars is Zoe. Zoe has been exposed because John has come over to the Vengeance tribe and has, unknowingly or knowingly, not sure just yet, exposed that Zoe said that she lost the slide puzzle to Chase, or that she won the slide puzzle, or however it became across. The Vengeance tribe is taking notes on Zoe's lie, and it's just been building up until she's finally spilled the beans to Magingo and Josh. Matt, you've seen Fresh Meat, you've recorded it. Seeing this returnee play like this, kind of intricate game right off the bat, like having to balance all of this so early on, like what are your thoughts on how Zoe is managing it? And what are your thoughts on Zoe's strategy thus far in damage control almost?
Yeah, I mean, one of the hardest things you can do is coming back as a returnee, especially when you have newbies. Like, you're going to be top of the radar, all eyes on you just because of that. I can also speak from experience. Like, I think one of the hardest ways that you can play Survivor is spinning your web of lies and trying to get everyone in on that. And like hers, not her own fault, but just so happened the way the game played out, John came over and kind of blew that up. So like, it's just kind of a strategy that you have to commit to and hope that it lasts all the way to the end of the game, or else it's going to really just buckle your knees. So I'm really curious to see how she adapts from here. I know I would probably just be like in damage control mode, like trying to figure out like, all right, who can I really trust? Like, and like the cat's out of the bag. Like, everyone knows that I lied, but like, who can be okay with me lying? And that's when you kind of like form the alliances.
I think at this point, Zoe is like, she's very self-aware of what she's done. She called herself the sneaky snake, and I think that was a very valid statement. So I'm hopeful that, like she had backed herself into a little bit of a corner in the fresh meat season. I think that's happened a little bit now, but I think she seems at the moment more well prepared and more self-aware to kind of handle that.
She's got some.
I feel like if I was her, I probably would have tried to come clean to try and like repair that former, like, notoriety that she has of like lying about the idol and your season. So it's like, it's funny to watch her go through the same thing. And I don't know, maybe it's a mistake. I view it as a mistake right now, like make the same mistake again. So
she did come clean, did she not?
Well, and
Does
she
not
came
everybody
clean
agree?
after people like confronted her on it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, she's playing like a very touchy game. Like, I mean, she can only tell so much information to so many people without it blowing up in her face. But without her really knowing, I think Josh is doing a good job at spilling her tea for her and tells basically his whole tribe, or I guess his whole alliance and then some, about her idol and kind of exposes it, but then shifts the attention back to Josie, because I think his line of thinking is almost, it's better to know that Zoe has an idol, put that on the back burner. Josie has yet to even confirm anything. James, this is your first time kind of seeing Vengeance play out. This is what they've been doing while you've been actually voting people out. Where would you how do you kind of see like that power dynamic of Josh or Tyler like interacting with all this news of Josie's potential idol as well as Zoe's confirmed idol?
I think I ended up putting as my pet peeve on your little intro or your form as drama. Yeah. And I think all this classifies as drama, and it's just unneeded, like scrambling, like everybody panicking, chaos with no looming tribal or vote. I would be, if I was over there, I would just be out of all that. But it's part of the game, I guess. I don't know. Tyler's definitely getting way too paranoid. Everyone knows that from home.
Yeah, let's talk about Tyler. Comes back from Exile Island. First thing he tells his tribe, sits them all down, just like everybody else has, and he lets them know that he has a thing and does not provide any other information than that. Matt, we've seen people come back from Exile Island. What was, Tyler had time to think of things out there to come back and say, and he comes back with a thing. If you're allied with Tyler, regardless if he tells you or not later on, what are you thinking, in that perspective?
I mean, I would just be face palming the entire time he's telling a story. It's like, okay, either tell the full truth or completely lie about what's going on. Don't play this middle game of I have something, but I'm not going to tell you what. Now you just broke everyone's trust, and now everyone wants to figure out what that is. So I don't really know what he's doing. It does kind of fit this persona he's developing though, of kind of goofy, doing kind of funny things. And I don't know if that was supposed to be a funny thing to kind of lower the tension, but I'm not sure it worked.
I think it raised the tension a little bit more, because that's when things really kind of cooked up over at Vengeance. And you see Josh exposes it to Tyler. Tyler shares his vote information with Josh. Big exchanging of information. Eli's in on it. Brooklyn's in on it. Sam, Boy Sam is in on it. So all of these people kind of coming together to share this information, have no kind of outlet to express this information other than tribal council. And we see it kind of boil over once we enter the challenge. And the challenge is something that we try to fake out, I guess, maybe our fans of fresh meat. We were ending day one and we wanted to do the twist again where both tribes would be going to tribal council. So we wanted to put our castaways in that mindset of, all right, we've seen this before. This is what we can expect going into it. James, the look on your face when I was editing was pretty evident. I mean, you seemed very visibly upset. I mean, more mad at me maybe that I had thrown that twist at you after losing all day, finding out that you would be going to tribal council. You did have a chance at individual immunity, but once that twist was announced, can you recount your feelings for me?
it was just immediate realization that like it's like I'm in deep trouble, because as much as I was stressed, worried about our previous tribals, in the back of my mind, I was always like, okay, like we can lose every tribal all the way to the merge, and I'm probably not going anywhere. That's just kind of how the game works. You keep, even though I don't think I won any points in any of the team challenges, I'm still going to be perceived as someone you need to keep on your tribe in order to have a chance at winning another challenge and staying safe. So going in the game and in the game, I always figured like I'm safe to the merge. Like that's kind of just like common sense of the game, in the position that I'm in, just off of like first impressions or whatever. And then that happened, and I was like, okay, that's a complete 180. Now it's get rid of that guy from the tribe that, even though they're not very good at challenges of reality, like they're the one that might help them win challenges, or the thought too of individual immunity down the road or whatever. So yeah, I knew I was in deep trouble and had to get the individual immunity in that challenge.
Yeah, I mean, you've had some pretty good reads from, kind of having Drew's number from the beginning to understanding where Grace was at kind of in the social dynamics, and then also seeing that the other tribe was probably going to target you, and then hard juxtapose that, fast forward to them talking in a group, just collectively, yeah, James seems like a competitive person. Yeah. So I think you've had some pretty good reads in understanding where that, like where you're standing in, not just on your tribe, but in the entire game is. So I applaud you for that. During that challenge, though, we see Adrian obtain the idol from Zoe with the help of Magingo. So that was a storyline that has been building up. Zoe has held this idol from the first episode, and she can finally activate it by giving it to Adrian. Now, Adrian has this idol and can use it on his own tribe, but he has to wait around in order to give it back to Zoe. Those rules might not have, they were explained on the paper. I don't think they've ever been explicitly said on camera. So for those listening, those are the rules for the idol. We'll go to Juliana. Juliana, you have Matt, as your husband. You see Zoe and Adrian out there. Would you be playing like that to give them the idol, or maybe the other person on the table was Hannah to grow trust with Josh? How would you maybe navigate handing that idol to either Adrian or Hannah, I guess, if you were in Zoe's position?
Yeah, I feel like that's a tough question to answer, because I feel like, knowing what I know from being crew, I maybe would have been watching, if Matt was Adrian, watching Matt play and being like, he's shooting himself in the foot over and over again. I don't know what's happening. I don't want him to have
that. Wouldn't happen.
But I'm saying if I'm Zoe and I'm worried about maybe some of the back and forth that Adrian's had, that he can't make up his mind, that would make me nervous as a player, regardless of whether it's my significant other or not. But I wouldn't have known that in Zoe's shoes. So I don't know. I guess I would have tried to find a way to have a very brief conversation, but I would be too stressed about making it obvious or about not making it obvious. So I guess I would have probably passed it off, hoping that Matt would have then handed it back to me if he figured out that I was in trouble or something like that. But ultimately, I would have hoped that whoever I handed it to would have then been a vote of confidence for them to hand it right back to me, because I had done the legwork to get it.
Yeah.
So, maybe I wouldn't have felt like Matt would have done that. And then I would have decided to give it to somebody else that I thought maybe giving this to them would actually be a bigger statement than giving it to the person that people expect me to trust.
Mm-hmm. I asked that because, you both have played Drinking Survivors together, so you know, what playing the game with a significant other is in the game. And to have this on this 3-day scale where, we have made this a theme of the season of having these partnerships, it makes it a little bit more complicated. You have the exile twist in it, and now we have this joint tribal council where it seems like these blood partners are everybody's last hope to or their Hail Mary, so to speak, for Vendetta. James, you were a big kind of factor of getting that ball rolling. You seemed pretty helpless at the beginning, kind of seeing the writing on the wall. But as momentum was growing, it seemed like the Vendetta tribe seemed to be all on the same page. Like, if you could recount that, like, what was that feeling like that you were putting that plan together of what was going to go down at Tribal Council, and arguably the biggest move that we've had this season, but also might be one of our top 3 in our season, or our series.
Cool. It was exciting. It was because I went from completely hopeless to, oh wait, like, this is probably what the game makers wanted us to do. Here's our plan. And so it was exciting thinking through, like, okay, you have this person over there, you have this person, kind of doing the math, starting to add it up. And then, but again, there was just so many factors, and a lot of factors I didn't even know about. Maybe I should have been more skeptical of different exile things going on. But yeah, the core feeling there was a lot of excitement, and still nervous, obviously, but it was fun. It was a lot of fun, that 10 minutes or whatever, as we were lining up to go to, because that was right before it was like, all right, 5 minutes or something like that. Line up, gotta get to Tribal. And then we were like, oh wait, like, let's do this.
I'm curious your thoughts on this, James, because I was thinking about this watching the episode. Like, what do you think would have happened if, instead of keeping the tribe separate after the challenge, that everyone could have kind of mingled together? Because, like, my interpretation is, like, people would kind of see that you are a pretty, like, honest, straightforward player, no drama, like you're saying, and be like, well, why would we get, like, James out now? Like, let's get someone that's stirring everything up. Like, I almost feel like people would kind of even more come to a consensus on Josie and, like, or someone else that's been, like, kind of causing more interpersonal problems than, like, you. What do you think about, like, what do you think would happen?
I think it would have depended how much time there was, for sure. Because if there wasn't enough time, then it would have been basically what already played out, because we kind of did all talk a little bit at Tribal. And so if it was like a short, chaotic amount of canoodling that we got, I don't think that much would have changed. But if there was enough time for like the blood connections to kind of pull aside, talk through, catch up, get on the same page, think about the future of, like, how soon the merge is likely, and everyone to kind of, like, open their minds up, like, okay, like, it's basically like we're merged already. Like, we're all here. We got a couple more votes probably, and everyone starts kind of thinking in a different way. The lines get a little bit more blurry. And yeah, I think it would have been beneficial to me a lot. Yes. And I think I asked that too during when you announced the twist. I don't know, maybe I didn't, but I think I remember asking to clarify, like, okay, like, do we get any time to talk? Like, we're going to go back to our own tribe and then meet at Tribal, or maybe I talked to a cameraman or something, but
it was me. I said no.
The other thing to, like, think about with that too, me and Juliana were talking about, like, that would have given Carrie and Josie more time to talk. And I wonder what Carrie's read on Josie would have been, like, not isolated at exile, but, like, in the thick of things. Like, I wonder if she would have, like, viewed that relationship differently.
Yeah. And obviously that was my biggest, if I were to have a regret or, like, something that, oh, looking back, I should have done this, that was definitely it. Like, Carrie was one of those people that there wasn't any particular reason, but just with how little time we had, I didn't talk with her much, especially one-on-one. And I think if I would have, even just, like, one or two times leading up to, like, exiles or when she got back, that kind of thing, I think there's a possibility she could have opened up and to me separately and be like, oh, like, this is what happened, like, honestly. But I don't think anyone did that with her that much, and kind of, so that's why she never really felt that comfortable with anyone on our tribe. But a lot of that too is that she just wasn't there for so much of our time to canoodle. She was out at exile, and so that really did kind of exile her from the rest of the tribe. And I guess that's kind of the goal too that's the downside of going to exile, and everyone knows that.
Yeah, before we kind of talk about where Vengeance was at with everything, that's kind of a good point that I also wanted to touch on with Carrie and where she's at going into this tribal council. She's given us a couple confessionals saying that she does not feel comfortable voting for Josie, but she doesn't really she speaks up a little bit, but it seems like Vendetta is full in on this plan. And if you are Carrie, how do you navigate that? That's we see how, that end result of that tribal council is. And then we look at where Carrie has been at all game. She's been at exile. Her name was voted at the challenge that sent John to Vengeance, as well as the challenge or the tribal that sent Grace home. So she's already kind of got, votes for her on that tribe. Does she full on flip to Vengeance, or does she stay with Vendetta? She says she doesn't want to vote anybody out. It's a very interesting headspace, and we see where she goes at tribal, and we can revisit this conversation later, but wanted to kind of put a pin in that. Meanwhile, at Vengeance, they all pile their votes on James, but Tyler very audibly again calls out Zoe, wants to go talk to her one-on-one and debrief what's going on. My interpretation of this was that Tyler you heard about her idol, and with that idol, once Zoe told somebody, that idol's power kind of became a game of telephone where it just gained new power or new ability with each person that went to. By the time it got to Tyler thought that idol could only be played on somebody from the Vendetta tribe, and that Zoe was going to vote or play it on you or something. And that was the whole confusion of that conversation. But we see that big, I want to talk to you, I'm going to pull you aside. And as the tribe just kind of came to this collective, we're going James. Matt, what was your thought on Tyler, pulling that right before tribal?
I think, honestly, this is my own opinion, so I'm not saying this is right or wrong, but I think that's kind of an amateur move. If you're trying to start some momentum towards something or learn the truth about something, right before tribal as you're walking over there isn't the time to do it, because who knows what Zoe's talked about with other people, who knows what that information could have done if you learned it earlier. Tyler's just playing an extremely paranoid game, and you can literally tell because even in confessionals he's always looking behind his shoulder. So it's I think he's just on edge, honestly, more than maybe even Josie is on edge. He's able to cover it up decently, but you can tell he's constantly just freaking out internally.
I described it as Tyler's Blair Witch Project confessionals, where he's just constantly turning his head, seeing who's behind him, what's going on. And I don't know, even from the editor's standpoint, I still can't really pinpoint why Tyler feels the need to be as worried as he is. He observed Magingo whisper to Brooklyn in the first challenge and built that up in his head. And then he sees Luke and Magingo having this conversation. Granted, they are talking about these partners in the game and how they need to split them up, but they're talking about Josh and Hannah. Tyler, main character energy, thinks it's about him and tries to push the vote towards, something else to save him. James, you knew that the vote was coming your way, but I guess you see this paranoia, you see this quote unquote pet peeve of your drama, kind of going down over at Vengeance. How do you maybe keep that control in that center to go into tribal and to be confident with the plan, to be confident with your allies? Because it has to be a little bit jarring when you see that much chaos come from, not even hearing your name out there, from just the assumption of having your name out there. How do you personally kind of keep that, that center?
I trusted my tribe a lot. And so that gave me comfort and confidence. Maybe it was more trust than they deserve, but I don't know. I don't think so. I felt really good about my teammates there. I felt good about our plan. And it kind of all made sense logically. And I didn't have space in my head, I guess, to worry about anything besides that. And so,
yeah. Well, Juliana, you were on a winning tribe, and your first tribal council was kind of anticlimactic. Hannah got medevaced with that. But you kind of experienced a lot of like that kind of building tension, maybe on day one. Seeing how Vengeance has played out, how their day one has played out, how could you maybe like compare that to how our Ionia tribe members, were, and how might you have navigated how Vengeance is doing?
I think I remember Ionia people getting kind of like squirrely, and there was a big like boy alliance versus boy versus girl alliance conversation on the table that was frustrating, but also seemed true. And so that kind of contributed to like general paranoia of our tribe, even though we had been winning. So I feel like similar things are happening where all of a sudden Josh and Tyler and Eli and Zoe and I'm forgetting the fifth. Who's the fifth? This alliance, this like alliance of 5 that is forming, like that is never ever sustainable when you move forward through the game. And I felt like that happened on our tribe as well. And like there were 2 groups that were going to battle against each other if we were going to have a vote out or something like that. Because the beginning's tough. Like the first time you have to vote somebody out, like I remember my name being on the table for our tribe's first vote out. And that would have been a really difficult thing to navigate because people were picking up on which girls were going to play competitively and which ones weren't. And so I think that that's kind of what is happening, but maybe in like a less logical way. I don't quite know how to explain that, but I just feel like I don't understand why the 5 who chose each other. And I don't understand what's going on with Magingo because she seems like she's on both sides and can't make up her mind. And if I'm Magingo, I'm thinking maybe Luke's speaking a little bit more sense than Josh and Tyler, who are just like panicking about everything that Zoe says, because they can be their own players and they can be their own person and have their own opinion. And I have been like surprised at kind of the way that the people who are the leaders and seemingly in charge of the tribe, what their mindsets are and how they're playing. I don't know if that makes a whole lot of sense, but it just feels more chaotic.
Yeah, they're very leaders.
Yeah.
There's a lot of assumptions going into this tribal council, and I kind of wrote some down before Vendetta and Vengeance even like kind of sit down. There's just an assumption that Josie has an idol that's kind of just out there. Based on the story that she told. Tyler's assuming that Zoe can play an idol for another competitor. He did find out that Zoe handed it over to Adrian, but still there's an idol out there on the Vengeance or on the Vendetta tribe that Adrian has. Tyler is also assuming Magingo is against Tyler. We see that in the tribal canoodle, he tries to throw some votes on Magingo, which he is successful at doing. And then Luke is assuming that the blood bonds are going to, ride or die to 6 together, which I think is kind of a fair assumption, but based off what we see kind of go down. And then the Vendetta tribe is just kind of assuming that Carrie is okay with Josie going home. So there's a lot of kind of assumption going on. We see a lot of that kind of come into play during that canoodle session. You have Josh and Hannah trying to flip, or Hannah trying to flip Josh, Zoe trying to flip, or Adrian trying to flip Zoe, Allie flipping Tyler, and then we have a group of Vengeance players kind of being rallied by Luke that just weren't included in there. Matt, so we have this big tribal council go down, and people were visibly excluded from this canoodle sesh. How did you see that? If you were a player like Sam, like Brooklyn, like Luke, like Eli, like those partners get up and canoodle. James goes over to John. Like there's people that are not talked to at all during this canoodle sesh. What would you be thinking like in that moment?
I mean, it would suck if I was like one of Sam or Eli, but like I got to give props to you, James, and like all of Green Tribe for like orchestrating that move, because you did it exactly how you should have done it. Like you can't include everybody because then it just gets all blurred. Like you say, we're trusting these people. This is the plan. And you executed it perfectly. Like you went up to the people that you thought would make the move, and they did. Like the plan worked except for like one little hitch. So it would be like shit if I was Eli. if I was Eli, I'd be like, I need to try and get in these conversations. But I think that you shouldn't include the outsiders.
So I kind of want to make this a general forum. So like any thoughts on this? Because I have gone back and forth on Carrie's move on if it was a good move or a bad move. Because knowing what we know about Carrie, I'd already kind of recapped it, that Carrie was on the outs on Vendetta, whether it was from being exiled or receiving votes at previous eligible like vote outs for her. Carrie on paper was on the outs of Vendetta. She has this idol that's only good for one tribal council, and her partner Josie is on the line, and she passes it over to save her in a very big clean sweep. I believe it was 9 votes were negated for Josie out of Vendetta, who went into tribal council with 6, which is crazy. And 2 of those people voted for McGingo, so they flipped even more people than what they initially expected. But what Carrie doesn't know is Josie's position on her tribe. Is saving Josie that valuable, or should she maybe have like played it for James or given it to James or something? Like how do we all feel about Carrie's play? Does anybody have a thought that we can kind of bounce off of?
My thoughts about that move have Carrie in my top 3, so I'll save my thoughts until you're ready, Tom.
Gotcha. Yeah, Matt, I guess we can hop to you.
I mean, retrospect, like hindsight's 2020.
Yeah.
Every single time. You can't be like, oh, Carrie should have expected that the partners would actually listen and vote for this person. Like, no. Like, you can't, you're, as viewers seeing everything, Carrie has such a limited view of things. So Carrie, her perspective is she's on the furthest out of her tribe. She has this one connection with someone on Yellow Tribe. Like, why not try and like bolster that? Why not maybe try and flip over to Yellow Tribe or whatever alliance Josie might have at this time? So again, like in an ideal world, Carrie like probably shouldn't have played it, but there is no way that she could have known that.
That's fair. That's that's where I'm back and forth on, is because like the foresight is like you can't really like take into consideration a lot of the factors, but I think in the time that she had, it would be a good move. James, I do have a question for you, and this was just kind of a hypothetical that I thought of, because one of Carrie's big holdups with the idol was that if she were to play it, it would be like a almost like bad for like the Green Tribe, because you wouldn't trust her, because she said that, I didn't get anything, but if she pulls out this idol, then you're like, oh my gosh, Carrie lied. If Carrie said to you guys on Vendetta and was like, I have this idol from exile, I'm going to play it for James, how would you interpret that? Would you see her as like a liar? I know this is, again, kind of like a very big hypothetical, but if you could place yourself back in the game where you were at, if Carrie pulls that and to save somebody from Vendetta, how would you interpret that as a player?
She would have been a hero, for sure, in my opinion. Everyone would have had their own, but I'm a forgiving person and a trusting person. So if she would come in, say, like, we're at our most desperate hour, she pulls out that idol, I would understand that she didn't want to tell us before. That's kind of a given. Like, they want to hold their information tight. And now she comes out and gives that up for the tribe. Then it's like, boom, she's in. She's one of us. She's part of this core Green Tribe that I'm trying to keep together and keep strong and have the tightest bonds in the game, and go into the merge and go in like a wrecking ball and run train on the rest of the game. So it would have been fun. It would have been cool. I would have loved it. I would have trusted her. I think everyone else would have been on the same page. Hard to tell though.
Yeah. It is very hypothetical.
I just got to say one thing. Why I don't think we should be putting Carrie under fire for any move that she made. We need to be putting Adrian under fire for every move that he did not make with his idol. So that's what I'm going to put out there.
That is fair. Adrian did hold an idol, and I had asked Adrian in the confessional. You might see a little bit of it in episode 5. It was just kind of irrelevant at this point. I didn't want to bog down the storyline more than it already had been. But Adrian, I was like, Adrian, you have this idol. Like, are you planning on playing it? And he says, no, that Zoe gave it to him and it's her idol. So we will see what comes of that in episode 5. once we get to that, there's a lot of things building up from this tribal council. We had a comment earlier from a viewer that said, despite all the chaos, the results of tribal council were rather predictable. Unfortunately, James, you were voted out. The one positive is that it's a good setup for the upcoming swap. So we'll see if we do have a swap coming up in episode 5, but we have a lot of damage control to do on a tribe. Vendetta is down to 5 members now, so they are, scraping by to Vengeance's 6, but there is a lot of beef going on. James was voted out with 5 votes. Magingo received 2, which were thrown by Carrie and Allie at Tyler's request. And then we have Luke throwing a vote onto Hannah because that is who he wanted to, kind of gun for. So a lot of these dynamics are heating up going into episode 5. And we will see what happens. But until then, we need to tackle our power players of the week. Mark in the comments says Matt is his power player of the week. So Matt, you finally get some love. We didn't get to do this during Survivor Dearborn, but we do get to do our power players for episode 3. So for those tuning in, we all pick 3 people. We start at number 3, go up to 2, and then 1. Each one is divvied up by different points. And then we all post those on social media for you to keep track of who we think as viewers and as hosts of the podcast to see where we're at in the season. And this was a tough one to do because this tribe will force all 17 players to play. And I feel like each one can maybe have a reason for being in this top 3. Juliana, you said that Carrie is already in your top 3. We'll see if she's number 3, but would you care to start us off with your number 3?
Well, I wish I could show some allegiance to Josie, but I just think her position in the game is too poor to really give her that credit. However, I will say when I was filming Tribal, I had no idea what occurred, and so I thought that was the end for Josie, and so I was like hyped as her sister and shocked, jaw was on the ground, that she kept herself in. So that's my honorable mention. But I think Aubrey is my number 3 for this week. I just think that overall, she is in one of the best positions at the current moment to make it far in the game. I think she's in a really, really strong position on the Green Tribe. I think that she is putting out strategy without making people think that she's running things. But I think she actually has a really strong hold on what's happening in her pre-merge situation. I think everybody trusts her and likes her. I think it was a strong move for her to vote Grace out because I think Grace would have been a threat to her later on. And I also think that it is helpful to not have a significant other in the current moment. I think that her partnership with Magingo could flourish, but I also think right now being untethered is an important component of her game.
Awesome. All right. Aubrey getting 1 point from Juliana. Matt, what about you? Who's getting your 3rd place of the week?
I will throw my 3rd place onto Luke for the sole fact that watching this and hearing his reasoning about like what he was saying at Tribal Council, I was like, that's exactly what I would be feeling. He was saying like, okay, why are we like, he put the vote on Hannah and he's like, it's clear that Hannah, Josh, Zoe, Adrian, and I forget what the other couple is, but he's like, there's no one that's going to join into that 6 group alliance when it comes down to it. Like if they had it their way, that's the final 6. He's the only one that's really like kind of catching on to that. And like you're saying, the strength/weakness of having a significant other in the game. So he made some questionable reads, but he's still, in the power alliance, and he's starting to catch on to this like relationships that I think other people aren't.
All right. I think Luke is now officially on the board. So congrats to Luke. So James, who is your number 3 of the week?
I would go with Hannah, kind of for similar reasons that have been discussed, where we're talking about that potential 6 of those tight relationship alliances, couples, whatever, for the off chance that that does somehow slip by and work out. That's a good spot to be in. And she also has those tight Forged in Fire Green Tribe bonds to kind of add to that as well. Whereas, I don't know, in my opinion, I think those bonds are tighter than kind of those random things that are going on in Yellow Tribe, but that's me.
Yeah. All right. Well, my number 3 is Hannah's partner in crime, Josh. And I think Josh did seem a lot like kind of played into the chaos this episode, but Josh also kind of got the ball rolling on Yellow to, target Josie. He got that information on Zoe's idol, filled in his alliance. Whether it was a good move or not, I think he's a center of a lot of people's trust at this point, especially to those that are close to him. And he did get that ball rolling on Yellow to at least get their minds thinking that if we do go to tribal council, Josie's story isn't adding up, we should be targeting her. And then once that, opportunity presented itself at tribal council, I think that is where a good chunk of his alliance was able to springboard and go with that vote. He will see what happens after, because I think his name might be front and center on Vengeance as one of the top offenders for flipping. But I think this episode, that move might not have happened without Josh kind of stirring up the votes a little bit at the beginning. So it was a tough one to narrow down. But I think I'm pretty firm with my number 2. And my number 2 is Magingo. And I think Magingo is going to make her, debut on our list as well. Magingo is in a very tight spot. We talked about her not really picking a side just yet on Tyler, Josh, and Eli's alliance, or Luke's alliance, but she's getting information from both people. She voted Josie at this last tribal council. She was also the one that leaked to Josie that she was up for votes. So she has Josie's trust regardless. And she was the one that also assisted Zoe in getting Adrian the idol. So she's got a lot of assists going on in this episode. Might not be the main move maker this episode, but she is definitely getting on my radar, at least as a player, that people should be watching out for. And I think they are watching out for her, but she's doing a darn good job, and it'll take a decent wave to push her out of the game at this point, not just Tyler's paranoia. So, Jules, what about you for number 2? Swinging it back to you.
Carrie's my number 2. And if I'm Carrie right now, what I know in the game is that Dom has promised that keeping my partner in is going to be advantageous to me at some point. I'm probably thinking that means at the merge. And so I know that keeping Josie around is a better move for my game individually. She doesn't know what's going on in the other tribe, but I think after the live tribal, I think it becomes apparent that she has some inklings. I think that that's clear in some of her confessionals. So if I'm Carrie and I'm thinking even further down the line again to the merge, if Josie has this target on my back, she's going to target, or the tribe collectively is going to target Josie before they're going to target me as Carrie. So Josie then becomes a shield for me. And that was the strategy that I played in my own season. And so I have to give a nod to Carrie to that, because if she's thinking long term of, okay, well, what's my advantage if a merge is coming, if a swap is coming, something has to help me. If Dom has promised that keeping my partner in the game is going to be useful, and I think taking that a step further and being able to recognize Josie might be a target, that might have been a mistake, but also if swaps occur in her favor, she ends up with Josie. Josie has a bigger target than Carrie.
Fair, very valid. Yeah. Matt, what about you?
My number 2 is going to be Allie. I think that, first of all, for being the youngest person on the cast, she's doing an awesome job integrating herself with her tribe. She has not really been talked about at all. She voted for Carrie on the previous vote. No one even batted an eye at it. The following, canoodle session, they're like, "Oh, who'd you vote for?" She's like, "Carrie," and they're like, "Oh, that's okay." She has Tyler constantly asking about her, looking out for her, and it's funny because Tyler likes to create this persona that he's the mafia boss, but I'm kind of getting the impression really it's Allie pulling the strings. I just think she's in a very great position. She has Tyler as almost her meat shield. And she's really gained the respect and trust of everyone on her tribe.
I think that's a good pick. We haven't talked a ton about Allie's game thus far on the podcast, so we'll see if we can talk a little bit more on episode 5 when we get that out. But I agree. I think Allie's in a really good spot and has played a pretty good day 1 so far. James, what about you for round 2?
I'm going with Luke for my number 2. It was touched on already, but he's very clued in to kind of the future lines that are going to be drawn when those couples come together. And at the same time, so there's that group that's on the outside of that. And he's kind of the most aware of that. And yet he's certainly far from being too much of a leadership threat or anything. He's kind of operating in the underground still with those people. And he's just an all-around good social player, a lot of good casual connections. I think he's going to play a pretty honest game, similar to maybe how mine would have gone. And so, yeah, he's my number 2.
All right. Luke getting some more points. And I will start us off with our number 1s for the week. My number 1 is none other than Hannah. I was a big fan of Hannah this episode. She came out swinging, like usual that she has all of day 1, something that we hadn't really seen of her in fresh meat. At this point last season, she was sitting on the ground asking to be voted out because of her back. And I think this is a brand new player that we've seen. The Vendetta tribe would not be able to pull this move off without Hannah's information that she got from Exile, that she, pulled out of Tyler to that Josie is the one that's on the outs. And so she was the one that pitched that got everybody on board to hop on that train. And it worked. They flipped people for it. And Hannah was also the one to sit up and say, Josh, I need to talk to you, and got that ball rolling. And I think that's the mentality that, is the big moves that people talk about, because it's going to put a target on her, but she, has to do that, has to throw this Hail Mary and get that ball rolling for Vendetta. She's as her friend, I'm super proud of her, of what she's been able to accomplish this day 1. She's officially PRing, which I was happy to see, but also on a producer, on a host level, that was phenomenal. That was just great. Pitch blackout, Hannah, lit by the torches, and gets up and starts canoodling. That was something that, I couldn't, that was what we dreamed of when we produced this season. So Hannah's getting my 5 points, and I think it was a great play. So Jules, what about you?
Luke is my number 1 for the previously stated reasons. I didn't film him on day 1, but I was wondering to myself the whole time if anybody was thinking about those 6 people. And watching that and hearing him say that was enough for me to be like, yep, that's where I would be at this point in the game. I'd be tugging that back in my head, because that is going to become the most important component, I think, moving forward in this game, is what's going to happen with those 6 and who is attentive enough to do something about it or work with those 6. So yeah, Luke's got my number 1.
All right, Luke getting points. Matt, what about you?
I'm surprised no one's mentioned him yet. Mine will be John. I think we are watching an absolute masterclass of a social game right now. Truly, he's just ran circles unknowingly, other people unknowingly. He's ran circles around them. He got kicked over to the other tribe, integrated himself beautifully. They're barely even talking about him. He said it himself too, during this tribal, he's in the best position possible. No one from Green Tribe is going to target him. And then Yellow Tribe, if they do target him, he's got all of Green Tribe on their back. So he's basically right in the middle of it all, and he's just doing a great job. I'm really impressed.
I could get behind that too. John was on my honorable mentions. James, curious on how you will round us out for your number 1 for this week.
My number 1's Aubrey.
All right.
Already been mentioned. Obviously, the same reasons. A good low-key position that she's in. She's going to stay there. That's kind of how she operates. She's got a good social game, and she displayed a good individual immunity game with the first win there. And no one is realizing that she's Sydney's sister. and Sydney made it to the final 3. And so she's kind of maybe should be on people's radar for that, but she's not. She's done a good job at kind of playing a easygoing game, nice casual, social, good relationships, being in the right side of all the votes, and kind of subtly steering the ship where she wants it to be. So.
Nice. All right. Well, we wrapped up our solid power players for this week. We have some new faces. And as always, I will tally all of those up and post those on our Instagram at Survivor Grand Rapids. So for those watching, tune in for that tomorrow. We will have those posted. James, you touched on it real quick, and I wanted to bring it up on some point in this episode that Aubrey is Sydney's sister, and we are done with day 1. And I remember we were filming, and it was just so funny how many juxtapositions we had already had to Fresh Meat, how the Backyard Tribe with a Hickmott sister on it just lost every single challenge all the way up to the last tribal council. Yet you did win the reward challenge, the Joey's reward, which is the same thing that happened in Fresh Meat. Zoe won the individual immunity at the last immunity challenge on day 1 in Fresh Meat. She won it again now. So there's a lot of juxtapositions. We will see how that carries over into the next episode, episode 5. And for those tuning in, this is our most viewed podcast that we've had. Appreciate everybody in the comments tuning in. But unfortunately, this week I am behind on editing. We had 4 episodes ready to go when we were launching, and I am unable to get an episode out this week. We have all caught up, and I want to make sure that we're putting out the quality content that we've been able to put out this season. So I'll be taking this week off. We'll be posting some fun content on our social media so that you can still be engaged with it. But we're going to kick off day 2 on episode 5 next week, Wednesday at 7 o'clock. So tune in for that. See the aftermath of everything. It blows up. That's part of the reason why it's taken me so long to edit, is just because there's so much more footage to delve into. So this is our first break that we're going to have to do. I'm not sure how many more we'll have to do, but my main goal is to be able to tell these people's stories, tell our castaway stories in the best way possible. So I hope you all understand, and I'm really, really excited for everybody to see the rest of the season. James, last question for you before we log off. I'm sure the fans would like to know, if asked back, would you want to play again?
Of course, yeah. My dad asked me if I would apply for another season, and I said, well, that's not really how it works, but if they want me back, I would do it for sure.
Awesome. Well, I'll take notes. I'll write that down. Well, James, I really do appreciate you hopping on the podcast and going over this episode with us. Again, also taking the jump to be on Bad Blood. It was an epic season. You destroyed at every aspect of it. You got voted out on, the wildest way possible. So you share a part of Survivor Grand Rapids and Dearborn history. So I appreciate you playing and coming out and being out there, which was a great time. James was robbed. So maybe we'll see a redemption arc for James, but we will see. Matt and Jules, thank you for hopping on and going over this. It was a massive episode. We had a great panel discussing this. We're over an hour, but we covered a lot of information. So for those tuning in, again, tune in next week, Wednesday, for episode 5 at 7 o'clock and catch up, rewatch if you haven't already. But until then, everybody can head back to camp. I'll see you all later. Good night.